Peace and love, freedom and decolonization to all African people, those at home, those abroad, and those in the future. As always, if you have two shoes, please sell one and buy a sword. If you have two trousers, please sell one and buy a sword. Because now it is time for revolution. And this revolution is no longer on streets. This revolution is not about burning cars. This revolution is about building our own cars and selling them to make money. Essentially, this revolution is in the mind, because if we are not in charge of our mind, of our thoughts, we cannot be in charge of our actions, and we cannot be in charge of our lives. And the one who is in charge will take control of our lives and make us tools for his own power and the tools of self-destruction. So thank you very much for joining us today on our weekly conversation where we talk about matters that are important to our liberation and emancipation as African people. And today we are just going to talk about the role that people play in the liberation movement, or in the change that need to take place in a society. Or specifically, I should say, the role that us African people, the masses, I should say, should play in what Africa needs to become, in the change that we want. Essentially, today, Africa is faced with a lot of challenges. Most importantly, the challenges relating to the governing system that we have in Africa. It is no longer secret that the governing system that we have in Africa was set up by colonial powers to allow for the wealth of Africa to be channeled continually towards the West. And by that, it means the leaders that we still having in Africa today are in most cases agents of Western imperialism. They are working to take care, to defend and to preserve the interest of the Western society, even though when they are sworn in, they declare to preserve and to protect the constitution of our countries and stuff like that. But the whole system, the whole structure has been designed and put in place to serve the Western society. And that's the reason why, despite all the resources that we have in Africa today, the African child is still uncertain about what will be his future after he's done with his education. It does not even have that, that insurance that he's going to be employed, he's going to live his life comfortably and have a decent life for him and for his loved ones. And most of us, though we're studying in Africa, our eyes are fixed in the West. And we pray every day that one day I can get a visa and go to London, to France, to America, where we, in most cases, have our dreams located. And this is a reality in Africa today. On top of that, we have corruption, we have looting of the resources, even by the same leaders that we have in place. We have, state capture by the same leaders that we have in place. So in the midst of this situation, or all these situations, all these things that we are confronted with as African people, there's a need for a radical change. There must be a fundamental change for us to actually begin to see the Africa that we all want. And this change implies restructuring of the governing system, because the major problem that we have in Africa is the problem of the governance. So we need to then, what we need as a change is the change of restructuring the governance system in Africa through Pan-African means. Now, the important question is, who must bring about this change? Even though sometimes we know what needs to be done for the change that we want to be effective, right? And it's no longer a secret. What needs to be done is to dismantle the structures of neocolonialism that we have inherited from colonialists, as I've just explained, to then rebuild Africa in a structure that is fit to respond to our needs and our aspirations as African people. But the question is, who must be responsible for that change? Who must stand up and implement that change? And that is where many of us believe that we need a charismatic leader, some kind of supernatural person who has certain power to come and bring about the change that we want in Africa, for us as African people to get what we call liberation and emancipation, right? So what that statement or that narrative or that state of mind of believing that we need some people, some strong leaders to come and change things for us to see what we have hoped or what we have always hoping to see in Africa, that statement is wrong. Is wrong. The truth is, people, the masses, you and I, have the power to change things in Africa. And for things to change in Africa, people must change things. No leaders, but people must change things. Now, let me explain why people must change things. Since the beginning of the modern history in the world, every major change that has taken place in the world was an initiative of the masses, mostly not of the leaders. Leaders, in most cases, they want the system to be as it is, because as the system is, people are oppressed, leaders are enjoying all the benefits of the land, and leaders just find themselves comfortable. So there's no rush or agency on the side of leaders to change things fundamentally as we need to change things in Africa today. So for things to change, people must change things. Just like in the past, whenever there was a fundamental change in a society, people were at the center of that change. But the point is, when the Western man writes the history of the world, he writes the history of heroes. He writes the history of leaders. He writes the history of great men. And in that process, he put aside the role that the masses have played in making that history possible. For example, when you read about Martin Luther King, of course, he's a great man. He was a great leader, a great visionary. All the books written about Luther King project him as a single leader, a great man. But Martin Luther King couldn't be a great leader without the people who were making things happening for him. For example, every places where he were going to talk, people had to be involved in organizing, in inviting other people, in raising funds to get the organization in place, to get the whole events, planned and well organized and managed. So King could just come and deliver a speech and go home. So it didn't do much. People who made him popular are the people who were organizing these things, are the people who were actually organizing all the events that he was attending to talk. The same with Malcolm X, the same with all the leaders that you can think of. There were always people who are the masses, who had to be involved in fundraising, in organizing, in publicizing, the event itself, and inviting people and organizing the whole thing so that the leader can just come and deliver the speech. So the question is, who really made things happen? The leader who made a speech, or the people who were involved in making all those things or that speech possible? I'll leave you to answer the question. So, but in a nutshell, what I'm trying to point out is people, the masses, even though they have been neglected when the history is written, but they are the ones who have always been at the center of historical development of our world, because people make things happen, not really leaders. Now, the reason why we, especially in Africa, expect a strong leader to come and make things happen, for change to take place, is simply because we have a messianic mindset. And what do I mean by that? A messianic mindset, it implies that people believe that for things to change, there must be a kind of Messiah to come and bring about that change. And this is most importantly facilitated by religions, messianic religions that in which we have been indoctrinated, to all, I should say, messianic religions that have been forced into us to make us people who look at themselves and think they are not capable of doing something unless there's a divine power in the water, divine power in the wind or in the sky to come and do things. You see, so this is the problem. That's why even when it comes to political solutions in our communities, we believe that for things to change, there must be some kind of a hero, some kind of a messiah to come and bring about change. But can you count how many heroes we have had in Africa? You can count more than hundreds of them who have been killed, but the situation of Africa still does not change. You know why? Because we haven't played our role as yet as the masses of Africa. We don't realize that we have a major and important role to play in what Africa ought to become. Because that Africa we're talking about is just you and it is me. And if we are not involved in making things happening, eventually nothing will happen. We will forever wait for leaders to come and change things, or for angels to come and rebuild Africa, or even for Jesus to come and rebuild Africa. But that is not how things work. And most importantly, this belief, this mindset of expecting a strong leader to come and do things instead of us being involved, it's simply because we don't want to take responsibility of doing something about our future. We believe that our future has to be in the hands of other people. We don't want to take charge of our future and make things happen simply because we don't want that responsibility. We feel like that is not our responsibility. In most cases, we as Africans, we are good to talk about things that are not going well. We talk about things that need to be done. But when we talk about all those things in our mind, we think that there are some other people who need to come and make those things happen. We don't feel, or we don't look at ourselves as the people who are supposed to make those things happening. But what I'm trying to pass here as a message is that we are the ones who can make things happen. We, the masses of Africa, are the ones who must make things happen. Leaders don't make things happen. In reality, leaders are just the projection of the energy that is governing the masses, that is, driving the people. So that energy become kind of symbolized in or personified in a leader, but the work must be done by the people. The work has to be done by the people. And what we want Africa to become tomorrow needs to be done by us, the African people. So the question that I have for you is, what is your role in what we want Africa to become? What is your responsibility in the change that we want in Africa? What role can you play? Of course, you may say that, well, I'm busy working, I don't have time to do this and that. Of course, even during the time of Marcus Garvey, people were working. During the time of Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, people were working. But you know why those movements succeeded? Because the people who were working had that consciousness in themselves to think that for the movement to function, since we are working, we need to fund that movement. We need to sponsor the movement. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is all the major organizations that have existed in the past, they existed and they functioned and they succeeded because other people who could not be part of, who could not be involved on the daily basis, I should say on the daily activities of those organizations, they were able to fund or to sponsor those organizations with their money. It means the people who were working on other things were conscious that for this organization that is speaking on behalf of all of us, for it to function, to succeed, we need to support it. So they had to send their money to that organization for the organization to keep on working, to keep on moving forward, even though they couldn't participate actively on every day's task of the organization. So that's what I'm saying. You need to find your role to play in what Africa needs to become, because this is not one person's job. It is our collective job and collective duty. So you can participate as a member of the African masses. You can participate even by donating to an organization that you find to be worthy of your donation, because it speaks for the liberation and emancipation of Africa. And not just speaks, it works to bring about the total liberation and emancipation of African people worldwide. You can do that, right? It's a major contribution, because without your participation, financially speaking, these organizations will be forced to go to the same enemies of Africa to ask, to beg for money. And you know that money always comes with conditions. And that's the reason why most of our so-called leaders always compromise when they get funded by the system. So we should be the ones who are taking the responsibility to fund these organizations, to make sure that these organizations have enough funds to do whatever they have to do, the publicities, the transports, the organizations of events and stuff like that. The money needs to be there. So in a nutshell, people must do things. People must change things. We are now at a time whereby leaders are really not able to do things if we don't stand behind them to accompany them and to make things happening. So you need to find your place within the struggle for African liberation and emancipation, and contribute on daily basis. If not close, but by far, contribute as much as you can to make sure that these organizations must move forward. And before I leave, the only thing that I need to emphasize more is the need of organization. Though I've mentioned that people, the masses, must make things happen, but the masses must be organized. Without organization, there's nothing effective that we can do to bring about change. But with organization, we are able to do far beyond what we are thinking in our mind. So organize, organize, organize. If you are not part of any organization, try to find one organization that works for Africa and support it and be involved. Use your time, use your energy to push that organization forward, because our liberation depends on what all these organizations are doing. So I hope this short encouragement was useful to you, and if it is, please kindly subscribe to our channel, like the video, share it with your contacts, and help us to raise the number or the audience on our channel. So peace and love, freedom and decolonization to all African people, those at home, those abroad, and those in the future. If you have two shoes, please sell one and buy a sword, because now it is time for revolution. And this revolution is no longer on the streets. This revolution is in the mind, because if we are not in charge of our mind, the enemy will control us and make us the enslavers of our people. Thank you very much. See you next time. Bye-bye.